Step 2. Read the passage carefully. A summary of this step. The sermon starts with the text, the passage that you're preaching from. You need to read it carefully and study its contents. Well, first then in this step, read the passage several times from start to finish in English. So as you start, you need to read the passage through in English. Ideally, using at least 2 different versions. Versions that hopefully have different language strategies, different translation strategies. Now, I personally use the New International Version, 2011, the NIV, and I also use the English Standard Version, the ESV. In broad outline, the differences in translation are this, that the NIV takes a thought-for-thought approach to translation. It's what's known as functional equivalence, whereas the ESV takes more of a word-for-word approach, which is known as formal equivalence. And that means that the ESV is likely to be closer to the literal meaning of the Hebrew or the Greek, whereas the NIV is more likely to capture the overall meaning of the passage. So read the passage through a number of times and aim to become so familiar with it that you can think about it even when you don't have your Bible with you, as you think about what you're going to preach from that passage. But next, read the passage in its original languages if you're able to. Now, depending on your abilities and your resources, read the passage through in its original Hebrew or Greek and then translate it. Bible software like Logos 8 can greatly help you in this task. There are actually some amazing translation tools available to us today. Some of them are absolutely free. And that means that you don't have to be a great linguist to understand the Bible's original languages. If you're able to work with the original languages, then you should, because you'll be better able to understand why translators have made the decisions that they have about certain words or phrases, and you'll more clearly see the logic of the passage. Next, note your initial impressions. So after reading the passage the first time, make a note of those initial impressions that you have. What's the first thing that hits you as you read the passage? Maybe it's something about a person or an event or an idea. Write it down. Does the passage challenge you? Does it comfort you? Does it confuse you? Upset you? Write down those initial thoughts that you have. What are the things in the passage that you don't understand? What do you think are the main ideas in the passage, and what are the supporting ideas? Tim Keller suggests that preachers should ask themselves this: what does the author of the text want his original hearers to learn, think, feel, and do? As you work through these 16 steps, you'll spend a lot of time thinking very carefully about your passage. And because of that, you may forget your first impressions, your first thoughts, if you don't write them down. And when you come to explain this passage to other people, it's good to be conscious of the things that you didn't understand at first, as those questions might be exactly the questions that other people are wondering about as they come to this passage. Next, what is the tone of the passage? What feelings does the passage evoke? Is it joyful? Is it somber? Is it majestic? Is it hard-hitting? Is it sad? Is it exciting? The way we teach the passage must always be consistent with the tone of the passage. And so, for example, we mustn't teach about God's greatness and his holiness without leaving people with a sense of majesty and awe and wonder. We mustn't laugh our way through a sermon on the subject of hell. We mustn't weigh down the congregation with the weight of their sins when the passage is all about the joy of forgiveness. We must be consistent with the tone of the passage. Next, write down some of the key words and ideas. So note any words in the passage that might be significant, you think. For example, words that are theologically significant, or words that are ambiguous, a word that might have more than one meaning. Look out for the words that are repeated in the passage. If a word is used a lot in a passage, it's probably important to the overall message of that passage. Tim Keller suggests that we look for three basic categories of things in the text. First of all, repetition of words, ideas, or grammatical forms. Secondly, connector words such as therefore, because, for, since, if, and then. And then finally, any metaphors, any images in the passage. Now, the connector words we'll think about more when we get to step 5, when we consider the logic of the passage. At this point, I suggest that you particularly look at the key words and key ideas in the passage. Next, write down any words that you don't understand, including the verse numbers, and look up their meaning. Now, there are a number of different things that you can do to research the meaning of a word. Sometimes you only need to do one thing. Sometimes you need to do a number of things to understand the meaning of words. So here are 6 things. Number 1, look at the immediate context to understand the meaning. Number 2, look up the word in an English dictionary. Number 3, look up the word in a Bible dictionary or a glossary. That's a list of words that explain the meaning of those words in that list. 4, look at other Bible verses that use the same word. And here you can use a concordance. That's a book that lists all the occurrences of that particular word in the Bible. Number 5, read the same verse in other Bible versions to see how they've translated it. And then 6, examine other word study tools. So you can look at a lexicon, for example. A lexicon is a specialized dictionary that tells you the meaning of a Greek or a Hebrew word. Or you can use Bible software. Now, please note that dictionaries and lexicons give you the possible semantic range of a word. That is the range of possible meanings for a word. It's always necessary to analyze the context carefully so that you can work out which of the range of meanings is the most likely meaning in the passage that you're studying. So think, for example, about the English word B-O-W. How do you pronounce it? Well, you can pronounce it in two ways. It could be bow, or it could be bow. And this word, B-O-W, has a range of possible meanings. Among many other things, it's a type of knot that you use with your shoelaces. It can be used as a noun. You tie a bow. It can be a weapon, a bow and arrow. Again, it's a noun. It can be a rod that's used to play a stringed instrument, like a violin. You use a bow to play your violin. Again, it's a noun. But it can also be used as a verb. It's something that you do to show respect for someone. You bow before them. Or you can talk also about bowing out, which means that you retire. Again, it's used as a verb there. It can be used to describe the front end of a ship, the bow of a ship. Again, using it as a noun. See, that word bow or bow, B-O-W, has a semantic range. It has a range of possible meanings. And it's the same in any language. It's true with the biblical languages too, Hebrew and Greek. The same word can be used in different ways, and its context determines which one is meant. And that's why a little bit of language study can be dangerous. Because we see a Greek word and we think we know immediately what it means. But we only make sense of a word within its sentence and within its context. Take the Greek word logos, for example. That word has a semantic range, a range of possible meanings. Among other things in the New Testament, logos can mean word, like it does in John chapter 1, verse 1. Or logos can mean the content of a message. So, for example, we might say in English, the preacher's word was very helpful. In other words, the message, the content of the message was helpful. Or logos can mean the communication of a message. Again, we have a similar sort of thing in English. He had a word with me. In other words, he spoke with me. He communicated with me. Or logos can mean a saying. See, the only way you can work out which one it is by looking at the context. And so it's wrong to always translate logos as word, meaning the single building block of a sentence. No, words have many meanings. They have a semantic range, and we need to be looking out for those. Well, finally, what questions do you have that you need to take to the commentaries? Are the questions that you have from reading the passage that you need to note down so that you can get some answers from the commentaries? But let's return to section F for a moment, about finding out the meaning of words. Let's practice some real examples from the Bible of words we don't understand. So look at your notes. Example 1. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13. In the NIV, the New International Version, the 1984 version, that verse is translated like this: Brothers, we do not want you to be ignorant about those who fall asleep, or to grieve like the rest of men who have no hope. Now, what does Paul mean when he refers to those who have fallen asleep? Well, let's apply our method. Remember those 6 things. Look at the immediate context to understand the meaning. Secondly, look up the word in an English dictionary. Thirdly, look up the word in a Bible dictionary. Fourthly, look at other Bible verses that use the same word. Read the same verse in other Bible versions. And then sixthly, examine other word study tools. Now, if you look at your notes, you'll see that I provided you with some of the information you need to work out what that word means. Please pause the video at this point so that you can complete the exercise. So that was quite an easy example. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13, Paul is using the word asleep figuratively in the sense of dying. But let's try another example. Look at Galatians chapter 5, verse 19. Again, the NIV 1984 says this: the acts of the sinful nature, the flesh, are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, and debauchery. What is debauchery? Well, use the method we used before and use the information I provided for you. Please pause the video here to complete the exercise. So what is the meaning of debauchery from Galatians chapter 5, verse 19? Well, notice it appears in a list of negative characteristics that are the opposite to those produced by the work of the Spirit. It's acting in an ungodly way without any moral restraint. It includes a lack of sexual restraint, but it can also include other immoral excesses as well. Look at the list of questions we need to ask ourselves about this step. Questions to ask ourselves as preachers. Have I read the passage in different English versions? Have I read the passage in the original languages and translated it if I'm able to do that? Have I noted the tone of the passage? Have I noted the key words and ideas from the passage? Have I researched the words I don't understand? What questions do I need help with from the commentaries?